You are not vanishing. You are answering a call that no one else can hear. You had felt it for a while, a fine crack running through the noise of your days. Work still works, friendships still exist, your timeline still scrolls. Yet something in you refuses to be fed by the same spectacle. The bright center of attention no longer feels like light, it feels like glare. You start standing a little farther back from the crowd, not out of contempt, but because listening has become more interesting than performing. From the outside, that looks like disappearing. From the inside, it feels like the beginning of a story. Joseph Campbell would call this the call to adventure. Not dragons, not banners, a quiet pressure under the ordinary. You sense that the life that fits your calendar does not fit your soul. You cannot keep trading your attention for approval, your mornings for metrics, your evenings for exhaustion. The call is a sentence you hear without ears. There is more life available than this. You do not have to romanticize it. Many ignore the call, many postpone it, many negotiate. You try to keep the old choreography, engage, optimize, announce, and you feel yourself thinning. A ritual loses meaning when it no longer binds you to what is real. Your small talk becomes smaller. Your laughter misses your eyes. Your body keeps the score, and the score is fatigue. The friction you feel is not failure. It is the scrape of the threshold. In Campbell's language, thresholds have guardians. In your life, they are practical. Family expectations, team deadlines, the algorithm's bribe, the mortgage. Your older story, the one that says you matter when you can be measured, stands at the door and asks for proof that you deserve to cross. This is the refusal of the call, and it is not cowardice. It is part of the map. You price the cost of staying. You price the cost of leaving. Both are expensive. One is paid with self-betrayal, the other with misunderstanding. What makes awake people look like they are disappearing is not that they grow cold. It is that they stop paying the first price. You begin to choose silence not as a performance, but as a condition of hearing. You place your phone screen down and feel the itch to turn it over. You notice that itch and do not scratch. You walk without headphones and discover that your neighborhood has a weather of its own. You make coffee slowly and hear the cup click against the saucer like a bell for prayer. No one claps for you, no one should. In mythic terms, you have crossed the first threshold and your reward is enclosure. This enclosure, Campbell wrote, is the belly of the whale. It is not glamorous, it is not a content strategy. It is a room where your masks do not function. You keep 3 small vows: morning light before screens, breathing that you can feel, words that are honest. Boredom visits you, and you do not throw it out. You let it open drawers. Anxiety, now deprived of noise, speaks in complete sentences. You learn that listening to yourself is not indulgence, it is maintenance. The person who emerges from noise is not stronger. The person who stops lying to themselves becomes more precise. Spiritual wakefulness does not make you superior, it makes you sensitive. Sensitivity is not fragility, it is resolution. You notice what used to blur, where you overpromise to be loved, where you overshare to be seen, where you overwork to be safe. The world, unchanged, begins to organize differently around your values because you begin to organize your values differently around the world. That is initiation. It includes trials, it includes mentors. The mentor might be a book that finds you. It might be a therapist who does not rush your pauses. It might be a sentence that will not leave. Attention is love with a schedule. In the older myths, a guide hands the hero a gift. In modern life, the gift is time that belongs to you again. You stop spending attention like it is free. You budget it. You protect it. You say no kindly and keep the door closed even when guilt knocks. You discover that limits are not a lack of love. Limits are how love returns tomorrow. The awake withdraw, not because they hate people, but because they have learned a boundary that most timelines punish. The self you bring to the crowd should be whole enough to survive it. Then comes the ordeal. It does not look like fire. It looks like a question. Who am I without being watched? The answer arrives on small peats. You are the person who can do one thing well without announcing it. You are the person who can show up to a conversation and not convert it into content. You are the person who can work for 2 quiet hours and count them as wealth. It is here, far from applause, that apotheosis happens. Not divinity, integrity. The pieces of you begin to cooperate. You sense your axis. You feel less torn between the room that needs you and the room that needs to be quiet. The elixir you receive is ordinary and precious. Presence, boundaries, a compass. Does this make you antisocial? The myth says no. The return is required. But the return is not a parade to the center. It is a re-entry at the edges. Awake people return where conversations are still possible, in small circles, in careful craft, in work that serves rather than perform. The awake avoid the middle of the spectacle because the middle is hungry and shouts while it eats. At the edges there is room to build without feeding a bonfire. At the edges there is room to change your mind. At the edges, attention is still a human gesture rather than a commodity. So the question of this essay, why are spiritually awake people quietly disappearing from society, is the wrong shape. They are not dissolving into air. They are moving to the borders where life is still thick enough to taste. They are leaving rooms that charge too much for entry, rooms that tax your nervous system, rooms that reward outrage in exchange for surrendering your mornings. They are saying, I will still help, but not at the price of my axis. I will still speak, but not at the speed that makes my words inaccurate. I will still be found, but not by a search that confuses noise with proof. You can test this with 3 ordinary examples. At work, you measure a day by deliverables that matter and relationships you deepen, not by Slack velocity. You mute public metrics that pull you into theater. You become generous in private. You tell the truth when you don't know. You risk being the person in the meeting who asks for clarity instead of momentum. Your career stops being a ladder and becomes a craft. That looks like a disappearance from the promotion dance floor. It is actually a return to the workshop. On social media, you become a maker rather than a broadcaster. You post one thing that cost attention to make, and you leave. You refuse to fight strangers. You refuse to applaud your own breath. You refuse to be a bait. You notice that your mind becomes less sarcastic when it is not being paid in notifications. You discover that your curiosity returns when your identity is not up for auction. From the outside, it looks like less engagement. From the inside, it sounds like a room where you can think. In relationships, you practice clean boundaries. You stop rescuing as a strategy for belonging. You stop hinting as a strategy for control. You say what you can give and what you cannot, and you accept the consequences. You schedule a weekly hour where you and the person you love ask better questions than, "How was your day?" You decide that love that cannot survive the word no is not love. It is a contract with a trap door. Friends who need your performance drift. Friends who need your presence stay. It looks like your circle shrank. It did, on purpose. Campbell called the figure who completes the circuit master of 2 worlds. Do not misread that as domination. Mastery here is balance.
You develop the skill of entering noise without letting it change your name. You can speak in a crowded room and still remember what you serve. You can be silent in a crowded room and still contribute. You can disagree without drama, agree without flattery, and leave without a wound. You become the kind of person who can be trusted with other people's attention because you have stopped stealing your own. The modern world does not reward this easily. It pays better for hot takes than for cool breaths. It pays better for certainty than for humility. It pays better for performance than for presence. If you choose presence anyway, expect to be misread. Expect to be told you are hiding when you are actually healing. Expect to be told you are too quiet by those who profit from your noise.
Expect to be told you are too intense by those who prefer you unfocused. These are not omens to reverse. They're confirmations that you have changed currencies. Of course, there are risks. Withdrawal can harden into avoidance. Boundaries can calcify into walls. Craft can excuse isolation. The map warns you about this. Liminality is not a home, it is a corridor. Retreat should end. Silence should yield to speech. There's no heroism in staying inside the belly when your bones have regrown. You do not disappear forever. You disappear long enough to come back different. How do you turn this into a path instead of a mood? Use a simple triad called Threshold Elixir. Called. Train your attention to notice the precise form of your friction. Write down 3 places where your routine demands numbness to be tolerable. Match each with one small change that costs you something real. A time block you protect, an app you uninstall, a person you stop pleasing. The call is made of specifics. Threshold. Make 2 lists, what you will pay to cross and what you will not. The first is sacrifice. The second is identity. Do not confuse them. You can give up speed, but not truth. You can give up access, but not dignity. You can give up a platform, but not your axis. Name the guardians at your door. They have less power when they are visible. Elixir. Write 3 sentences on a card and carry them until they become your tone. What I serve, how I protect it, where I refuse. Those sentences are not for other people. They are for you in rooms that move too fast. They are for you when the old currency jingles in your pocket. They are for you when applause invites you to sell a piece of yourself for a sound. Why then are awake people disappearing? Because they have learned that attention is the first environment. Because they have realized that the world we share is downstream from the worlds we cultivate in private. Because they have decided to practice stewardship over performance. It is not a trend, it is an initiation. You can join it without announcing it. You can begin today without permission. You can step back without stepping away from what matters. Imagine this. You arrive 5 minutes early and sit in your car with the engine off. You breathe until your breath sounds like you. You enter the building with a slower pace than the music because rhythm should not be outsourced. You say only what is accurate. You do not repeat yourself to be believed. You do not edit your face to be liked. You leave without carrying the room home in your body. That is not withdrawal, that is craft. Or this, you place your phone in a drawer for an hour after dinner. You walk 3 streets and learn the names of plants. You wave to the neighbor who keeps the porch light on for strangers. You return and read 3 pages of a book with sentences that were not designed by a committee to travel well on the internet. You go to bed without declaring it. That is not disappearing. That is returning to the part of life that does not ask for a receipt. Or this, you tell a friend that you cannot be the person they vent to when venting is a substitute for acting. You offer an hour on Sunday to plan,
to budget emotions and energy for the week. You hold it, you end on time. The next week, they have a decision instead of a monologue. That is not cold, that is warmth with form. The society that counts only what it can see will always think you have gone. Let it wonder. Your task is not to be witnessed, your task is to be whole. Whole people are not louder, they are clearer. They choose fewer rooms and bring more life into them. They combine tenderness with limits, curiosity with patience, skill with humility. They do not live on the main stage because the main stage is too bright for roots. They live where roots can drink. Then, when it is time to step forward, they do, and they leave before the applause becomes a leash. This is the paradox that spiritually awake people embody and that Joseph Campbell's map explains. The path that looks like absence from the center is the path that returns you as a gift to the margins that actually feed the center. Departure is not escape, it is selection. Initiation is not isolation, it is strengthening. Return is not spectacle, it is stewardship. You disappear to repair the instrument. You come back to play with a cleaner tone. If you want a starting ritual, make it embarrassingly small and maddeningly consistent. 10 minutes of quiet at dawn. A weekly hour with no screens and no output goals. A rule for rooms, where you appear, for how long, with what intention. A rule for speech, say less, say true, stay kind. A rule for attention, spend it where you would want your soul to live there forever. None of this earns you a medal, all of this earns you a life. And when you forget, and you will forget, begin again. Stories are not straight lines, they are spirals. You will loop through ordinary world, call, threshold, belly, ordeal, elixir, and return more times than you can count. The loop is not failure. The loop is the form of growth for creatures who learn slowly. Each time you will carry a better compass. Each time you will price the threshold faster. Each time you will bring back an elixir that is less about you and more about the world you are learning to serve. From a distance, this looks like people fading out. Up close, it looks like people turning toward the deeper room. The door is not locked. The key is a small vow you can keep today. The path is not crowded because it cannot be crowded. It is walked by one at a time. If you are hearing this, that is not an accident. The square will keep shouting. It can afford to. You cannot. You are needed, but not in the way you were told. You are needed as a person who knows how to cross the threshold and return with something that heals. Step back. Breathe. Choose your edges. Carry your compass. When they ask where you went, tell them the truth. You went where your attention can still hear your name. And now, you're coming back. Quieter, slower, steadier, so that what you give will last.